post it later because
Oh, no
we couldn't
wonder. So
populate.
we were all having that same trouble, I guess.
Yep.
All right, let me mute myself.
We are live. Anybody know who this is?
My finger, Selena.
And there's a reason we're playing this song, by the way.
I guess we should start.
Yes, we're started.
We are live before we get too far into the song.
Start dancing, Jenny.
That's right.
Woohoo!
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. This is it's nice to see you on the evening after a full day of things that we normally do. So welcome everyone to Coffee and Pandusa. This is one of our special shows at the month of May, a Thursday night show. I'm Christian Cano, one of your co-hosts, along with Mama Ruth, Jenny-Jaymes Gunn, Stephen DeFiore, and Barb Bacon, who I believe will not be joining us because she is doing her thing, doing taxes, and she's doing all kinds of stuff, helping people around in her neighborhood. Oh, that reminds me, I got to do my taxes by the 15th, right? Yeah. So
Makes us too.
That's right. Yes. So it is. Today is, what day is it? It's May the 6th, or better on our show, the day after Cinco de Mayo. So I guess that's what we will say. Tonight's topic is something that we have talked about several times on our regular show on Wednesdays, and we are going to be talking about this hopefully a little bit more in depth. And we have a special guest who's joining us from New York, I believe. And I hope I pronounced your name properly. You've told me 3 times and I still feel like I'm going to mess up. It's Mr. Pappalardo.
Perfect.
Ah, good. Excellent. He is joining us. And so let's go around. What we do normally, sir, is we go around the Brady Bunch screen and you introduce yourself. And if you have a button or an imaginary button, any causes that are important to you. And I don't have the Brady Bunch screen up. Does anybody see that, or want me just to... Let's do this. Let's go Jenny, Mama Ruth, Stephen, and then Mr. Pappalardo will go, and then I'll introduce myself as well. So Jenny, you don't mind starting?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jenny-Jaymes Gunn. I am a local LGBT advocate. I do things with Charlotte Pride and the National Organization of Women, Charlotte, and a lot of other things, including Moms Demand Action, healthcare justice, and many other causes. Mama Ruth? Maybe.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ruth Perez. Everybody calls me on the show Mama Ruth, since I am a young, sexy grandma. I'm a community advocate. I also support NOW, which is the woman that Jenny represents. And I sit on 2 different boards, which are community health clinics to serve the uninsured or underinsured community in poverty. And also I do court mediation for our people out in the community that are trying to get evicted. I'm also a co-host for Coffee and Pandusa. This is our 3rd year, if I'm not mistaken. So woohoo! And my imaginary button, like always, it's let's end gun violence. We need a gun sense reform. We need to put a stop and raise our voices. How dangerous it is. I don't mind carrying a gun. We just need to get better educated, where you cannot just leave it out there and, for everyone to get killed. Just no sense. Next, I think Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'm Stephen DeFiore. I am the recording secretary for the Libertarian Party of Mecklenburg County. I am an affiliate coordinator for the state party as well. I am a big proponent of responsible gun ownership. And my buttons are free speech and end the wars and qualified immunity and general liberty oriented stuff. I want people to be more free to live their best life with as little fear of being locked in the cage as possible. Next.
And our guest, if you'll introduce yourself and any buttons or any causes that you work for.
Okay, first of all, thank you for having me. My name's Scott Pappalardo. I'm from Orange County, New York. I'm a gun owner, but I've thrown my hat into the gun violence prevention arena 3 years ago. I started to educate myself about the gun violence problem in this country. And, I was always advocating for my weapons. And then, I found out how bad the problem actually is once I opened my eyes. And, right now I'm fighting very hard to get ghost guns banned because I feel they're a threat to every gun law we have in this country. So that's my main thing right now.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, sir. I think Stephen is probably excited. He finally has another New Yorker on our show. So
Oh, yeah.
He's usually overwhelmed by Texans. Jenny's from Texas. Mom Ruth is from Texas. I'm from Texas. Barbara's lived in Texas. Dr. B, who joins us all the time, was a neurosurgeon in Texas. So, all right. So today's topic.
I got you back, Steve.
Pride.
So today's topic is actually, will banning assault rifles stop America's gun violence epidemic? Something that we've talked about, and I know is being a lot of gun sense individuals like Moms to Ban Action, and I actually have my Moms to Ban Action shirt on today. Interestingly, they are actually having a call as we speak behind me. The Moms of Action volunteers in North Carolina. Their meeting started at 8 o'clock tonight. So let's go around and I guess just tell us in about 30 seconds whether you support. I know it may not be just a simple answer, but we'll just kind of start off that way. Do you support a ban on assault rifles? Yes or no? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first. I do not support a ban on assault rifles, but it's a term that doesn't make any sense. And if you want to do something about gun violence and you want to ban something, handguns is where you want to go, because the overwhelming majority of violence done with firearms is done with handguns. I mean, I'm against banning handguns too, but I mean, the fact that you would want to go after the least used thing to solve a big problem doesn't make any sense to me. But then again, I am one of those Second Amendment absolutist types. But I am interested in the conversation. And of course, maybe we can find common ground to make the country a safer place for as many people as possible.
Excellent.
Okay, next.
Jenny?
I am for banning assault weapons and high capacity weapons. There is no sporting need, nor is it really. The Second Amendment is awfully misinterpreted and manipulated to people's political ideology, and the Second Amendment does not guarantee the absolute unfettered proliferation of weapons as we know it. That is not what it says. That's not what it was originally written for. And there was a real purpose behind why George Washington was a proponent of the Second Amendment in the first place. And so we have to have something, we have to start somewhere. And the 10-year ban on the assault rifles was very effective. It lowered fatalities by 70% in gun shootings. And so it's a common sense step. And anytime that people refuse or dig in their heels not to look for either precautionary solutions or stuff like that, you have to question why we're fighting this battle. Like, we have 4 to 6 times more violent deaths by gun than any other westernized high wealth nation. So something has to give. And we have to make some common sense steps till we figure out a better solution.
Thank you, Jenny. Mama Ruth or Scott, who wants, or Mr. Do you mind if I call you Scott? I mean,
Scott is perfect with me.
Okay, thank you, because I don't want to mutilate your name during the show.
That's
Mama Ruth or Scott, you want to go next?
I wish we can just leave just the way we have named our country in freedom. I do agree that we have to keep everyone's and give everyone's their rights. But I also wish that everyone would learn or get better educated to earn that access of carrying or having such a weapon. So if they have to ban that particular one, I would vote yes. Because not everybody it's not using their sense to protect. They're using it more towards harming. And we don't want that.
Okay. And Scott, I guess you're next.
Yes, I would support a ban, although I don't think a ban would be very effective as far as ending gun violence. In 1994, when we started with the 10-year ban, it was a much different world back then. It wasn't America's gun back then. The ban actually made the AR-15 a more popular weapon, and millions and millions were sold because of that ban. Like I said, like Steven said, handguns are mainly used in crimes in this country. When someone does use an assault weapon, it's usually horrific. But also banning assault weapons, it's such a broad statement, and largely cosmetic to the firearm. You could take away those components of a firearm and still the same round of ammunition is coming out of that barrel. So I would support it. If the ban was the same as it was in 1994, all the assault weapons out there would be grandfathered in, and there's plenty of them in this country. It would make the prices go up on them and make it harder for people to get them. So I would support it. It's not, I wouldn't support going around and collecting them all, but I would support a ban. You're muted, Chris.
You're muted, my love.
You're muted.
As Jenny and Stephen would say, that's probably a good thing. So, well, now we know kind of how everyone is coming at that. I'm a volunteer, but really volunteer. I support Moms in Action, as I mentioned. I support the efforts that they are doing here in North Carolina, but also around the country. I'm kind of one of those individuals that I support groups and I kind of let them do their thing. And if I believe they are supporting the assault weapon ban, it's almost like I like for the experts to kind of give me advice, because full disclosure, we do not own a gun in this home. We don't plan to own a gun. There was a time where we did think about purchasing a gun for safety reasons when I ran for Congress. And then also when we started the show, because we've got some crazy threats from some of the shows. We just decided to stick with dogs, but we both have family members that are gun collectors, that are responsible gun owners. As I mentioned to you, Scott, before this show, we were talking briefly. My dad's oldest brother committed suicide at 17 years old. He found his dad's. I don't know why I get teared up when I say this, but he found his dad's handgun after school when he was in high school, and he committed suicide. And my grandmother found him. And I had kind of forgotten about that story until I was doing my Ancestry.com tree 2 nights ago. And I found him. And then I found his death certificate that was signed. He was 17 years old, and it said gun in the right temple, I believe is the description. So, I just want to hear what everyone has to say.
Can I jump in for just a second? Sure. Scott, what is the main part of your activism and advocacy? What is I guess maybe your platform in a nutshell? What are you advocating for as far as gun control or gun mediation, or what is your platform?
Well, like I said, right now, my main I was up until recently a volunteer and a lead with Moms Demand Action. My main thing right now is ghost guns, because like I said, they circumvent every gun law that we have. And here in New York, an AR-15 is illegal. There's a New York compliant version. But I can go online and I can have one shipped to my house, a complete kit, legally. Once I assemble that firearm, it's illegal, but it's legal for me to purchase it. No one would know I purchased it. No one would know I put it together. So for about $600, I could do that. And that goes for every state except for a handful. And the same holds true for handguns. So that is my main thing right now.
So define what is for people that don't know what a ghost gun is? What
It's a great
defines
question.
a
I
ghost
don't know.
gun?
Yep.
Okay.
Just for the audience sake.
So the ATF only considers to a certain part of the firearm to be the firearm. And with like an AR-15, it's the receiver, the lower receiver, and with a handgun, it's the frame. So that is shipped to you. They say 80%, but it's not really 80%. An unfinished receiver would require you to mill out the trigger control cavity and drill 4 holes or 3 holes on some. And the frame of the gun is the same thing. Drill a couple holes and file down an area on the slide rail. So it's quite, a handgun I could put together in about 45 minutes. So so these parts, the ATF does not consider the firearm until they're complete. So that's why it's legal for someone to just buy it, and and they don't consider it a firearm.
Yeah, and clarification on some of the laws and the history behind it. It has been legal to manufacture firearms in your own home for your own purposes since day one of the Republic. The barrier to entry for most people has been skill. Do you have the skill to do metalworking? Do you have skill to do gunsmithing? And most people haven't. Recent innovations in home manufacturing has allowed that to be more, how shall I say, democratized. So you can buy kits. They're like a little, CNC, like mini milling machine, and you put the weapon frame 80% lower for AR-15 or 1911 or whatever you want. You put it in there, and the machine just does the work for you. And you can get schematics for a bunch of different firearms for different styles of milling over the internet. As just because you can get schematics. The First Amendment actually protects being able to distribute schematics and designs for really anything you want, including these weapons. And so, one of the big reasons why this has become an issue for some, I think, is because more and more people have access to it now than ever before, because the barrier to entry is much lower than it used to be. Is that your assessment of it, Scott?
Yeah, that's for the most part, I agree. The age-old hobby of building your own firearms, I have no problem with. But I think to buy the receiver or the frame, you should have to go through a background check, just like any other firearm, and have it serialized. The main distributor of these products is a company called Polymer 80 that makes a plastic version. So the skill level required goes down. You don't have to have a milling machine to hollow out your trigger control cavity. You can use a regular drill press. So it is simplified. I think any student that paid attention in shop class is quite capable of fabricating these firearms. And like you said, I mean, there is a certain skill level, and the more skill you have, the better the end product. But certainly someone can easily make a fully functional firearm.
So Scott,
there's a question in the chat where Christian asked if we could read the text of the Second Amendment. Did I read that correctly, Christian?
Yeah, I don't know. Those who have watched our show over the last 2.5, 3 years, when we used to meet here around this table, we would always read one of the amendments of the Constitution. I carry the Constitution everywhere I go. It's the American Bible. It's what I call it. And we would always read one of the amendments as it related to one of our shows. And the Second Amendment, I know everyone, you're a huge proponent of supporting the Second Amendment. And Jenny and I always joke when we're around you, we're like, well, there are more than just 2 amendments. There's a lot. there's
yeah. I'm a big fan of number 10 personally. Like
Sure.
Number 1 and number 10 are some of my favorites. But
Sure.
yeah, the text of the Second Amendment, if you're curious, is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Very short and succinct.
I was going to ask a question again of Scott. This is a follow-up. How big of a market is the ghost gun market, and really, when did that kind of start? Because is that more of a relative term, more of a more recent trend, I should say? Is this something? because I've heard of them and I've read some articles on it, but is it something that seems to be more trendy, more popular of an option now?
Yeah, I mean, they started really becoming popular. I think it's around 2013, but with the internet, and people watching videos, it become more and more popular, and it to the point of, when the pandemic started, all these companies were back order for 6 to 8 weeks, and they were working around the clock fabricating these receivers and frames, trying to keep up with demand. Um, so God knows how many have been sold in the past year. But yes, they're if you speak to police agencies, they're coming up more and more in crimes. Believe in 2019, over 10,000 of them were recovered. And here in New York, where I live, in the next county over, we had a New York City Department of Environmental police officer fabricating them and selling them to an outlawed motorcycle gang. So they're becoming more and more a threat and more popular.
Hey, Jenny, I have a question for you, and maybe also Stephen. I know that, the shows that we've had, this is our third show, we've been kind of talking about gun violence and so forth. And I remember the lady that was on with the Moms in Action, and we were talking about assault weapons, or if I can remember right. And I think one of the reasons why they are supporting a ban on assault rifles or assault weapons is because of the amount of bullets that it can shoot at one time. And with the mass shootings, the belief is, my understanding, and maybe if y'all can jump in, is that if we can minimize a person's ability to shoot, I don't know the terms, rounds, I guess that's what you would call it, to shoot rounds. If they have a handgun, they can only, I guess, shoot so many. But if they have something that shoots a lot, that's when we have these school shootings and these mass shootings, and people don't have time to reply. I don't know. Is that what y'all understood from that, or just?
Well, there's a couple reasons why I know Moms Demand Action and several other groups, including one backed by physicians, is pushing to ban assault rifles, especially, is the power and the velocity of the round as well. So one of the things is that trauma surgeons talk about a lot is the fatality level. Like if you comparing assault high-powered rifles to another type of gun, and I'm not a gun expert by any means, but the chances of mortality go up with a more high-powered rifle because they do more trauma to the body. And so that's one of the angles in which there is concern. Obviously, assault rifle ban is not going to cure all of our gun violence problem, because we've proliferated a violence culture for quite a while. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. Yeah. Like, we're not going to ban one type of weapon and all of a sudden, poof, our troubles are solved. You can't have 30 years of war and all kinds of other violence and suicidal ideation at an all-time high, and that ban is not going to change that. So we do have to address multiple levels of long-term solutions and education, and then attack the classes of guns, to whether it's a temporary ban or a pumping of the brakes to slow down the proliferation of violence. And they feel, or at least what I've read from their group, is that the high-powered assault rifles and assault weapons, high-capacity guns, are the ones where we need to start. And that's in their opinion. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I also don't want to get in that comfort zone with saying, we did this with Obama too. We elected a black president, all of a sudden we're not a racist country anymore. It's one of those things. It's a false narrative. They're not mutually exclusive. And as Scott brought up a great point, ghost guns is an issue. There's a lot of other issues. We got to get into mental health. We've got to get into access to mental health. The highest rate of death by firearm is suicide. So it's as dramatic as mall shootings and grocery store shootings and all that. They are the smallest category of death by gun. Yeah. And suicide is actually the highest category by death by gun, which you can ban all the guns and we still are going to have suicide by gun.
Sure.
And the only way to reduce that is addressing mental health. So there is a
Right.
lot in play when you're talking
Sure.
about gun control and reducing harm.
Yeah. So Stephen and Scott, jump in, because, and I'm kind of embarrassed because I don't really know all the terms, even though I have family members that are gun collectors and in law enforcement and so forth. And I've been to the gun range twice. I'll admit it was kind of exciting to kind of shoot the gun. So, I mean, jump in and what do you feel? What do you think about that?
You want to go ahead, Steve? We can't hear you, Steve. You're not muted, but we can't hear you.
Try again. All right, go ahead, Scott. He may have to.
Okay. So, Jenny, the one misnomer, like when everyone says assault weapon, they picture either an AK-47 or an AR-15. And, you know, the high velocity round you're talking about is a 223, which is the most common in a AR-15. But it doesn't have to be. It can be a 9mm. It can be, you know, assault weapons is a large category. Handguns fall into assault weapon category if they meet the criteria. A shotgun can be an assault weapon if it meets the criteria. So, like I said, it's a broad range. But when you're speaking of an AR-15, yes, the round does a tremendous amount of damage to body tissue. It doesn't even have to hit a specific organ or whatever to destroy it. There's just the shock wave of it passing through the body does a lot of damage. But you know,
technical term is a hydrostatic shock.
There you go. There you go. You're back, Steve.
Yeah, I'm back. So I'll give my quick perspective. I don't mean to cut you off, Scott.
No worries. No worries.
My microphone's going to work, you know. So anyways, when I was talking with when we were having that conversation with the Moms Demand Action lady, you know, my perspective, and I could be wrong. It's just my take from it. The reason why they focus on rifles is because rifles are scary. You know, Christian, to you know, clarify something that you said about, you know, perhaps rifles have more round capacity than a handgun. That's just not true. I mean, standard handgun that police officers use, even in New York City, the Glock 19 can have up to 18 rounds or 25 rounds with an extended magazine, which are perfectly legal here in North Carolina and in most states, actually. So you can have, you know, as many rounds in a handgun as you can a rifle. And the ATF's rules, and I say this as a guy who's like a Second Amendment absolutist, right? The ATF's rules on what constitutes a handgun and what constitutes a rifle just don't make any sense, because you could take an AR-15, take the butt stock off of it, that's the part that you put on your shoulder, and suddenly it's a pistol now. Like, you know, so a lot of these rules are very silly.
And that's what was used in the supermarket shooting recently.
Yeah. So because these rules are silly, I'm curious. So any law or proposal for banning so-called ghost guns, that is to say, guns that are manufactured at home, how do you think it would come out on your, like, in your mind, for what you are advocating for? What do those laws and policies look like, either at the state level, let's say in New York, or at the national level, so they would affect the people here in North Carolina too?
First of all, I'm not calling for a ban. I'm calling for I'm calling for regulation. And
what would the regulations?
And ideally, I would like to see it federally, because I live 20 minutes from Pennsylvania. So, and Pennsylvania has very, you know, lax gun laws. So people go there and buy, you know, all sorts of things, which would include unfinished receivers. I simply want them to be a background check like any other firearm, and serialized. I don't think you know, that doesn't infringe on anyone's right to fabricate a firearm at home, and fine tune it to their preference. But you know, I don't think people, unfortunately, in this country, I think people have to, you know, they have to be held accountable. we can't just let people, in the same way we can't let people just, put nitrous oxide in their car to go down the highway at 200 miles an hour. There's certain things that we have to do because some people don't act responsible and the rest of us pay for it. So I think just regulating them is the answer.
One of the things, and when we see some of these mass shootings, and I know they're the ones that make the news, and I know we've talked about most of the gun deaths are not from mass shootings, they're from suicides and other things. But when you see the mass shootings and the person goes in there and pop, 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 that's what I'm thinking of, like kind of assault weapon. I don't know if there's a different term for that. But I've heard the NRA, and I've also heard if we had a person on a commissioner in Union County, and I forgot his name already. Remember, he ran for Congress as well. And he gave us some data that when the North Carolina did their gun law or something, that crime had gone down because people were a little bit, something about carrying your gun with you. People are less likely, if the state allows you to have a concealed weapon, you're less likely to be robbed because of the fact that they don't know if you have a weapon or not. I mean, he gave that data. And then I've heard some information like, well, we should arm teachers because if someone comes in with something like that, they can actually, help shoot that. But when I see these like mass shootings, and I'm thinking like just myself, if someone comes in and starts shooting, I don't know, it's like your reaction time and stuff. I don't know how that's going to make any, I don't know. I was thinking about that the other day. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Or
yeah, a lot of times people that want to be the good guy with the gun end up dead. Because if you have a live situation where someone has let's say it's an AR-15, it's an assault weapon, and you have a pistol. First of all, you're outgunned. Second of all, they're already an active shooter. So they already have the drop on you. I mean, a lot of people have this vision of a Clint Eastwood movie where, you're going to pull out your gun, one shot, and you're going to put it right between his eyes. In a live situation, your accuracy level diminishes a lot. And me personally, I'm not very good with a handgun. I'm really good with a rifle, but I'm not very good with a handgun. So, I'm not opposed to anyone going through the concealed permit. Well, I don't have a problem with that if it's done properly. I mean, Texas just passed permitless, carry, and I think that's a recipe for disaster.
But Texas have a disaster? They never have a disaster. They love deregulating everything.
Go ahead,
here's an interesting bit of trivia. Am I coming in loud and clear? Right?
Yeah, you're good.
So the permitless carry is also sometimes called constitutional carry. There is a state in the Northeast, Vermont, that has permitless carry for firearms, and I've never heard a whole lot about of gun violence epidemic in Vermont. Now, this I think speaks to something that's very important regarding cultures and cultures of violence, like Jenny was saying. And one thing that Moms Demand Action, that one lady was talking about that I actually really like is the doing something to help people with suicidal ideation, kind of a harm reduction thing, because that is like the overwhelming majority of people who meet their end via firearm or by their own hand, whether it's accidental or on purpose. And by having education, but also some way to get people help if they are in trouble, I think that's a fantastic approach, and one that I think almost everyone, no matter your political perspective, can come together on, because that saves the most lives without stepping on many toes. And that's just my
there's two things there that I see. When you compare Vermont to Texas, I think there's a lot more testosterone in Texas, and a lot more of the gun culture in Texas than there is Vermont. My personal opinion.
Texas is very important. Culture is very important.
Yeah.
Culture in perspective. I mean, first of all, Vermont's got a population of slightly over 800,000 people, or basically less than Mecklenburg County, where we're sitting right now. We have a population of 1.2 million people. So Vermont's 97% white. It's a fairly high average income. And a lot of violence comes from lack of equity, frustration. A lot of mental health issues are caused from a lack of access, equity. A lot of crime comes from lack of equity, access. So you have a circle of violence that is just like a circle of poverty. And Texas has a lot of poverty, has a lot of violence issues, has a lot of cultural issues. And
they don't have any electricity. They don't have any electricity. So
yeah, and in February they don't have any electricity. But
sorry.
But the reality is that Texas has had a problem controlling their violence culture, and there's a lot of reasons why. And you know, it has had a history of violence against women and not doing things about that. It is a very dangerous place to be anything but a white man. I mean, I grew up there, you know, and have navigated the spaces, and it has a lot of issues. But I do think mental health has to be part of the discussion when you're talking about long-term solutions. And it doesn't have to take 10 years, it doesn't have to take 15 years. You know,
Sure.
You look at how we've tackled other society issues, like, I mean, it's not comparable, but like, you know, the slogan, don't mess with Texas, and stopping, you know, littering and things like that. We have to create awareness. We have to have these discussions, and we have to, in the discussions of, like Scott was talking about, the romanticizing of the Die Hard scenario where Bruce Willis, aka the average person, is going to stop a band of terrorists all by themselves, and, you know, yippee-ki-yay, and gun down, you know, people.
Christmas movie ever, by the way.
It's a very good movie. I love the movie. I love the movie, but I don't like the message and romanticizing violence.
Sure.
And this heroic notion that guns stop guns is a crock of crap. And
hey, Jenny,
it just doesn't happen.
Hey, Jenny, I want to jump in, and I want to ask Scott this, and Stephen as well, because you remember the last show we had when we had the Moms in Action person on during the day, and we were talking about, and we also had a person who's a community activist and advocate for her. Unfortunately, she lost a son in her front yard, was murdered, if y'all remember, and she was on the show, and she was concerned about the conversations like Moms in Action. Yeah, it's about Moms in Action, because in many of our Black and brown communities, there's a different, I don't know how to word this, but gun violence it's different. It seems like in the white communities, gun violence to them is school shootings, that kind of, you know, things. In the Black and brown community, gun violence is being shot by police, you know, that are maybe some other, you know, so I was curious why, and I don't, Scott, you don't have to, I mean, you were a member of Moms in Action or volunteer, I'm not sure, but I don't know if you want to answer this or not, but I'm curious why Moms in Action doesn't address gun violence that from like Black and brown communities. Why don't they come out against gun violence from police? I mean, I don't know, is that?
Well, Moms Demand Action has.
Okay, all right.
You know, and, you know, I'm not, you know, it is gun violence. You know, I'm not 100% on board with their position on it. I grew up in a Black and brown community. I was the minority in my neighborhood. I grew up in the height of the crack epidemic, and it was being sold on my corner, and shootings were a regular basis. I've been threatened with guns. So I do know it from from that community, and back then, you know, I'm talking 1984, 85, you know, school shootings weren't really a thing, you know. But the Black and brown communities are dealing with gun violence every day. And I don't know if that's, somehow we have to break that cultural need to have a firearm. I mean, you know, when I was younger, you know, to have a firearm was cool, you know. So, you know, it wasn't so much about protection. And Fortunately, I recognized at an early age that I had a bad temper, and to carry a firearm for me would probably, and put me in prison. But I just feel like they don't have that fear anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
Stephen,
no, go ahead, Christian. What were you
no, I was going to say, you had said, and I appreciate you said that when we were doing the introductions, maybe there was something that we can come out of this kind of agreeing. I'm just going to say three things, and you can tell me maybe is that something that we could maybe agree. Do you agree that it is an epidemic, gun violence?
I think it's endemic.
Okay. Okay. And the second thing, would you agree that maybe a waiting period needs to occur for people, like when people apply for permits or whatever? I mean, is that something that you would think?
I would be against it, mostly because how do you make sure that one group of people aren't disproportionately, disenfranchised from others?
Sure.
Why don't we have a waiting period for the ability to post, speech or to vote or the things like that?
Because I'm not gonna kill my ex-wife with speech.
It depends, right? There's such a thing as incitement that's in the law, right? So.
Well, I mean, that's
indirect, but there's legal precedent for that. I mean, I'm not going to equate one to the other, but it is something to consider.
Jenny, jump in on that one, because I know you're on the board of the Charlotte National Organization of Women, and I've heard one of the big concerns from women is there was some data that came out. I can't remember if I heard that on one of y'all's meetings, that women are victims of their person they've dated or spouse being murdered by them with a handgun, or I don't know if you know that information, but I think that is one of the reasons why people are in favor of a waiting period, because if there was some argument at home or whatever, someone doesn't go out, just buy a handgun and.
Is that 52 women a month on average are killed by an intimate partner or ex.
I think you mean a day, not a month.
A month.
Oh, month. Okay. Well,
I mean, I'm not saying shot. I'm saying killed. 52 women a month. There's about 104 people a day killed with a firearm. So half of them aren't women.
Yeah. Right. Now, I'll say this. One of the reasons why I would be opposed to a waiting period is because some of those women, for example, like they're in an abusive relationship. They break up with their boyfriend, who is not a good guy, and he made a threat against them, and they go, oh snap, I need something, right? Because let's face it, a firearm is the great equalizer in that kind of interaction. If there's a waiting period, they might not be able to get the tools they need to protect themselves in time. That is also something to consider. I mean, it's a very complicated issue, right? And these broad brushes that we can try to paint an issue with, they don't necessarily apply, I mean, to every situation. So I mean, there's a lot of nuance in this conversation. I don't think we necessarily have the time to go through everything.
Yeah, right. Hey, Jenny, jump in. I know when you.
My stomach kind of did a flip when Stephen said that a waiting period penalizes women. It's again it is kind of like the old Cold War false narrative that we need nukes and they need nukes and we're just going to keep ratcheting it up. And that kind of discussion is a complete false narrative. Waiting periods are not. If I'm in an abusive relationship, for example, if you really want to protect women or people that are vulnerable, whether it's a same gender couple or whatever, have judges that actually do their jobs. There's too many cases of judges ruling in favor of a violent domestic partner, whether it's a man or a woman or a trans person, and allowing them to retain their guns and not enforce protection orders. But women going out and buying guns and then escalating the situation, or a man going out and buying a gun in domestic violence, when really the domestic violence issue, that's not going to solve anything. It's not going to protect anybody. And the false narrative that we buy guns to protect ourselves, doesn't really exist.
Well,
it's not very common.
That's I mean, and that's kind of what Stephen and I don't want to put you on the spot because you're the libertarian on the panel or on the show, and I know you're Second Amendment person, and as I am, I'm all amendments, and so
I don't mind being the pinata for a change.
so what if we had a libertarian president, a libertarian Congress, and a libertarian Senate? How would y'all address this issue in America?
Oh man, you just
in 30 seconds, because we're going to be running out of time here.
You just gave me a utopia.
Yes.
No, so like I said, it's a complicated issue, right? Like this is not something that you can do broad strokes with, right? How do you and part of the things that we would do is, libertarianism isn't like a monolith, right? It's a lot of different ideas, and people have different ways of wanting to achieve a freer world. And what does that mean for most people, right? Like, freedom to you, Christian, might mean something different than freedom to Scott or freedom to Jenny or freedom to me. But we all kind of want to live our own lives. So part of the solution would be to have conversations about what we could do to make the world a safer place for the most number of people. I know, like, for example, I work in a community grocer in a very poor area, and I'm like the only white guy where I work, customer or employee, almost all week. Like it is what it is. And gun ownership is not uncommon where, with the people I encounter. Most folks have the wherewithal to conceal, but some folks openly carry. And that doesn't bother me, but you have conversations with these folks, they'll say, man and woman alike, they feel like the cops can't protect them, and so they have to take their own security in their own hands. And that's kind of like a baseline thing. Now there's a cultural difference, right? If you go to South Park, for example, which is Scott, you may not know this, but that's like a high end area of Charlotte, kind of like a lesser Flushing, right? You would ask people who's responsible for your own safety, and they would say, oh, the cops, right? But then you go to say Biddleville, which is like Harlem, I guess. And you say, hey, who's responsible for your own safety? And these folks would say, you are, like yourself. And so there's an issue of, cultural disagreement on that. So I don't know what the solution is, but I know that having conversations is a way to find out what the right path is forward.
Yeah. No, that made perfect sense. And we're going to be, we promised each other we would stay within the hour on this show. We started maybe 2 minutes late. So we're going to, kind of switch it just 1 second. But the only reason I say that is because in the Black and brown community, we all go to a lot of meetings, especially during the pandemic. We ever to go to more via Zoom. There is this, I don't know if the word's belief, but mass shootings are caused by crazy white kids. The white kids are the ones that go in and do all the mass shootings. Every time there's a mass shooting, Black and brown community, we look at the TV going, oh, please don't let it be a Latinx person, please, because we know if it's a Latinx person, it would just be, oh, see, that's why, and so forth. But it's always like white kids.
Never is.
Never is. Exactly. And so I'm almost, I know Jenny had touched on this before. It seems like the gun violence or the mass shooting part of the gun violence in the America has a lot to do with this belief by white young men that they are either privileged and they play by different rules than the rest of us. I don't know if it's entitlement or privilege or something, because I would never, I don't know how, I mean, if you look at the data, it's so
we need someone who's expert on these specific cases.
That's right.
Some people say, oh, if they're on mental health medication or they're off in meds or whatever. I don't know the answer to that. I'm curious about though, for your activism on introducing regulations for online sales or self-milled firearms, so-called ghost guns. So what kind of stuff are you guys doing in New York? Do you lobby people in Albany? Like different type of things for upstate versus downstate. Like what does it look like on the ground for you?
Well, currently we have two bills addressing ghost guns. We have the Scott J. Beagle Unfinished Receiver Act and the Jose Webster Untraceable Firearm Act. The Scott J. Beagle part of it deals with the sale of, and the Jose Webster Untraceable Act is having a completed firearm without a serial number and so on and so forth. So they've already passed the New York State Senate, and they're waiting for a vote from the Assembly. So that's who we've been, advocating with right now.
Gotcha. Now, are there like specific, like you guys go to, the important people in the assembly and like lobby them, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, pre-pandemic days, we would go to Albany. We actually just did an advocacy day where we had meetings with 50 plus legislators, and we're really focusing on the assembly. That's who we need right now to vote on it. So,
is there do you see a difference in appetite for this sort of regulation, like in different parts of the state? Like I'm originally from the Adirondack, so the North Country. I know it's a lot different from even upstate New York, which is a lot different from like the tri-state area, New York State, Long Island. Do you see differences between the different regions of the state on appetite for this sort of thing?
It's gotten good reception. From both sides for the most part. In the Senate, we had about 12 or so senators vote against it. And some of them were Democrats. They were voting against it because of the felony penalties attached to it, which is another story in itself. But a lot of the argument was the hobby of building a firearm, which again, you can do just with a serialized receiver or frame. But the other one that I thought was interesting was, and I saw the letter from the senator that he was passing around to get people to vote against it, was that it's already illegal to own an illegal firearm, without a license, et cetera, et cetera. So criminals aren't going to go through the trouble of learning how to make a gun. And to me, they go through the trouble of extracting whatever they need from cold medicine to make meth. They go through great lengths to get around, working an everyday job like the rest of us. So there's nothing that's going to stop them if it's lucrative for them to buy frames and receivers online and make firearms and sell them for a profit. I think that's a ridiculous argument. But like I said, it has gotten good reception. The biggest thing is the felony penalty attached to it is to me seems to be the biggest hurdle, which is again ridiculous because it's already a felony to have a illegal handgun, or an assault weapon.
Christian, it looks like
sorry about that.
A little dead air there.
I was trying to send you a secret message. Stephen, would you agree that maybe that serial numbers should be on all guns, or I mean, is that something that you think?
So I'm a gun owner and I'm a gun collector, right?
Sure.
For legal reasons, I'll say that all the weapons that I own have serial numbers, and for legal reasons, all the weapons that I buy, like non-joking, like everything that I buy from a gun store, for example, or at a gun show from an FFL. Those, of course, all have serial numbers, unless it's like an antique. Like, I own a few like old cap and ball revolvers from like the 1840s. Those don't have serial numbers, but technically they're not a firearm unless they're loaded. Which again, the ATS rules are stupid. Which is whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, as far as now, the question what I think you're asking is, do I think having serial numbers on a firearm, whether it's an 80% receiver with so-called ghost gun, whatever, is a reasonable compromise?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I think you're asking. I'm going to say it would be unreasonable and say I wouldn't support that.
Okay.
Because there's a way around it, but mostly because, like, how do you enforce it? Who gets to issue the serial number? How do you get it? Is there going to be a waiting time? And we saw that during the pandemic, when there were riots in other cities, in other parts of the country, and people were afraid for their own safety. In Wake County, for example, which is the county around our state capital, the sheriff put a halt on pistol permits. And so people in Wake County who wanted a pistol permit because they felt for their safety were disallowed from being able to buy it by the sheriff. And it wasn't until a Libertarian Party member actually sued them to get them to reinstate that. So, who's going to enforce it, and how do you make sure that people aren't, disabused of their rights by that?
Hey, Stephen, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to ask a question, and let's do it in 30 seconds because we've got to wrap up here in just a couple of minutes. And I'm almost embarrassed to ask this question, but there's probably many of our viewers who may have the same question. If I wanted to buy a gun, I could go to a gun store, right? And fill an application out. They do a background check. Is that how it works? I'm embarrassed to ask that. Or I could go, I've spent 35 years in the hotel business. I could go to a hotel parking lot and someone can sell me a gun, a person to, right? Do they have to do a background check on me? If I buy it from an individual, it's a private sale, so I don't need a background check. Is that, am I saying that right?
Correct.
So
not in your state, not in New
okay.
York, you can't do that.
Okay,
But-
all right. So here in North Carolina, and I don't know.
The black market is always, with no regulations whatsoever. So, if you wanted to buy a gun on the black market, even in New York, you could without a background check.
Yeah, but he's not talking about black market. He's talking about an arms list sale from a person to person, unless he has reason to believe you're a felon or a prohibited person. Then it's his responsibility not to sell you.
But I'll give you an example, Christian. If you wanted to buy one of my firearms and you didn't want to go like, hey, Steve, I know you have this rifle that you don't want anymore, the thing that you don't want anymore. I'll buy it from you. I'd be like, sure. I'm going to want to go and do that transfer at a gun store, at an FFL. Why? Because maybe if I had bought that gun from an FFL, it's still registered under me. If it turns out that's used in a crime, guess who is going to knock on my door or bust down my door and shoot my dog dead? The cops, because they think I did it or it came from me. So, most responsible gun owners and people who know better are going to go through an FFL anyways. And the NICS system ain't bad.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked that question, because I know we got to wrap up. 4 years ago, when I was running for Congress, there was a conversation between some candidates in Texas, and I want to say it was Congressman Castro, but I don't want to exactly who. They were proposing that they were suggesting a requirement for gun liability insurance that would be required for someone who owns a gun, just as we have to have liability insurance for our cars, our jet skis, our dogs, homeowners insurance, you have to have umbrella insurance, that someone who owns a gun would be required to have insurance for that in case something happens. Taxpayers don't have to pay to clean up the mess. And the reason they were suggesting that is it would prevent someone from buying 4, 5, 6 firearms or maybe a tank or bazooka or whatever, because they couldn't afford the insurance. And maybe it would prevent young kids from going out and buying guns because you have to have insurance. I know we're running out of time, but does anyone agree maybe with some type of insurance requirement?
Yeah, that's a great way to keep poor people from being able to afford guns, which is a very Southern viewpoint.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and I, I'm not opposed to insurance, but if it's being used to prevent people from buying firearms, if it's cost prohibitive, if the intent is for insurance companies to cover the cost of gun violence, that's one thing. But if they're making it too expensive so people can't buy firearms,
I get it. Yeah,
I mean that's why I don't drive a Corvette, because I can't afford the insurance. But I don't know.
That's why I was going to make a joke, but it would be an inside joke between me. That's why my Porsche is in the garage. It's not driven very much. Jenny, we're going to wrap up here. And the reason, I'm not sure I think we've had this conversation. It was important to have this. I do hope that as a community, we continue to have these conversations, because there are people completely on, the Second Amendment people who you're taking my Bible, guns away. And then there are the people, let's ban, this, and it's a conversation that everyone wants to have, we need to have. The
We
reason
just show that we can have that conversation.
exactly,
Without
yeah,
whole thing or meet each other, even if we disagree on points.
and Jenny didn't do this once. So,
No, I didn't do the power clap at all. So I was fascinated with some of the
Bring it out,
discussion.
Jenny. Bring that out, girl.
No, we didn't get heated enough.
Need the power clap.
and I actually thought of our special shows. We've got 3. This would be the most heated one, and so. And
Well,
when it's heated, when it's heated, we get
Kristen,
2,000 viewers later. So it's go ahead, Jenny.
I'll go ahead and jump in.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest issues in we have a very frustrating era that we live in economically, and with the pandemic that has heightened everything. We and understandably so. People are scrambling to make a living. We're scrambling to even breathe, and so when we have violence, whether it's the George Floyd instance, or mass shootings at grocery stores or whatever, it's only highlighting what is a problem that we've ignored for a long time. We've had a gun violence problem for quite a while. We compared to 22 other high income nations, we have 25 times more higher murder rate in gun related homicides than the other 22 high wealth nations. Somehow they don't have the issue we have. And so at the end of the day, when I hear the word moms demand action, or the name mom, I think all of America needs to demand constructive dialogue. And this can't be impossible. This can't, for some odd reason, we live in some kind of kooky vortex where we have polarized sides that aren't willing to sit down and have common sense dialogue. And it can't be an all or nothing. Like, it can't be just unfettered access to guns and then not have the solutions to follow it up. So the people that are Second Amendment purists need to come up with solutions on their own that make sense. And I'm not actually hearing a lot of that from the Second Amendment deal. So in this country and going forward in other discussions, there has to be some constructive dialogue. We can't just sit on our hands and say, oh, well, that's not going to cut it anymore. And people are going to demand answers from people like us. And that's all I have to say on it. But I do think ignoring a serious problem just because of fear of loss is ridiculous and ultimately not sustainable. Something has to give.
Good point, Jenny. Let's go around the Brady Bunch screen. Once again, we do value your time. We want to wrap up now. We want to thank everyone who's watching us on Facebook, but the most people who watch us on Facebook later, and also on YouTube as well. We do thank you very much. Wednesday will be our show again, and we'll have Dr. Bumfeld, I believe, back talking about COVID. Is the worst over? We'll talk about that. Stephen, it'd be interesting to hear your point of view. And then we have one more special show on a Thursday night, and we'll be talking about the 600,000. It will almost be 600,000 by then. The 600,000 Americans who have died from COVID, and how unfortunately they did not. The vaccine didn't make it in time for many families in America. So Brady Bunch screen, we have Scott, Jenny, Stephen, and Mama Ruth got knocked out. She's having internet issues. And please tell us where you're going to be, or if any information you want to let us know within 30 seconds.
Okay. Again, thank you for having me. I think this is a really important conversation with the mix of people like we have here, because if you're going to come to any kind of solution, it's not going to be all the way to the left, and it's not going to be all the way to the right. We got to come into the middle and figure this out. That being said, where I'm going to be, I don't know. I'm kind of homeless right now. I've left Moms Demand Action. I'm flirting with a couple other organizations. So just again, thank you, and I appreciate the conversation.
Jenny?
Okay, I kind of spaced out there for a second. I am going to be at the Charlotte Gamers virtual event on Monday night. We have a free event that's called Jackbox. It is a video game show kind of thingy. It's super fun. It's in coordination with Charlotte Pride, and it's open to anybody that wants to register, and registration is still open for Monday night. That's primarily where I'm going to be, is here doing social distancing, recovering from my microchip that I got this morning for my second vaccine. Thank you, Bill Gates. And other than that, I'm doing good. See y'all.
Stephen.
All right. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Man, these audio things, you think I'd get the hang of it now.
Yeah.
John, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Christian, Jenny, for, not dogpiling on me too badly as the lone voice of reason. I mean, libertarianism. And I do agree that, listen, I'm against any and all gun laws. But that doesn't mean I can't sit here and have a conversation, right? That doesn't mean that there isn't some path forward. I hope that if there perchance or any libertarians watching this, you can take your viewpoint and set it aside for a second and engage in a conversation. Just trying to understand someone's viewpoint doesn't mean you take it as your own. It means that you understand what someone else has, right? Like where they're coming from. And so I hope that we have more conversations like this, and maybe by having this dialogue, we'll get some insight and we'll figure out a good way forward to solve not just this issue, but innumerable issues that we're facing. The motto of America is e pluribus unum, out of many are one. So many voices can come together in one glorious chorus. And I think that is one of the cool things about America. We have a lot of different people, a lot of different perspectives, and we can all talk to each other. The First Amendment rules.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Scott, for taking your time. I know your time is valuable. And thank you, everyone else, our co-host as well. Mama Ruth wanted to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day weekend. Happy Mother's Day. And I will be at church on Sunday to hear Jenny. Jenny is a guest speaker at one of the churches that I follow. And I'm excited to do that as well. And what I was going to tell you is we started the show with Selena, a former Tejano superstar out of Texas, Corpus Christi, Texas. And the reason I wanted to play her was because she actually was murdered by a gun by one of her volunteers, if you don't remember the story. And it's also on Netflix. They have a great season on Netflix. So we're going to end the show. If you're on Zoom, stay on if you don't mind, because we want to do a brief promo. But those who are watching us, and we will see you next time on Coffee Upon Dulce, we will end with some of this music. Steven's got a little rhythm. I know I saw him the other day. Bye, y'all. Thank you.